standing at what's called the Lorraine site near Fort de Chartres, and there's been a lot of archaeological testing done in this vicinity, particularly on the other side of the road from where I'm standing, in the 1980s, based on an aerial photograph that was taken in the early 20th century that depicts a stain, a stain in the ground surface that looks suspiciously like a fortification. And so in the early 1980s, Illinois State University came out here and did some testing, small test units across a field, looking to see if they could establish if that indeed was one of the forts that predated the building of the stone fort in the 1750s. We're back here on the opposite side of the road from where most of their testing took place to look at that again. Right now we have 3 features that are exposed in 3 or 4 test units, so we just have little windows on top of each of those features. We don't know what they are. There's a lot of stone associated with them, so they're probably associated with a building, or there's a building nearby. They have a variety, each of the features have a variety of 18th century debris. It looks like nothing here postdates 1770, which is proper for what we know about the history of the village of Chartres that was associated with the fort. It was basically abandoned by 1770. And so this fits with that history quite nicely. And right now we're just trying to get down into these features to get a sense of their function and to get a sample of artifacts. Come on over here, we'll look at rocks. Don't stop what you're doing.
Need my profile cut.
What's that?
Need my profile cut. It's alright.
This is feature number 1. They've just cleaned off the plow zone and they've mapped everything in place. And this feature is really unusual because it's got evidence of what we call primary deposit, which means garbage objects that are thrown right into the hole after they've been discarded, as opposed to have been thrown on the ground surface and trampled on for 10 years and then redeposited into a pit later. This looks more like the garbage was fresh when it went down in the hole. And some of the things they're finding are very unusual, although just about everything we find here is unusual because we have so few of these sites. But even within the range of the sites we have excavated from French colonial context in Illinois, these are unusual. This is part of what's called French blue-green glass. This is blown in a glass house in France. And the bottle would have been about this tall originally. We have the bottom and we have the top of it. And this was called a fiole, and it was used primarily for medicines, scents or colognes, or oils, like olive oil even. That's why it's got the narrow neck. And so it's some sort of liquid, and it's a reasonably precious liquid that's being shipped here in a French bottle from France. It would have had a little paper label on it originally. And this thing broke probably very, very close to the time that this feature was filled in, sometime in the mid-1700s. And this is a really unusual, finely potted earthenware table bowl with what we call a manganese decoration, and this is probably Italian. So this represents some of the products that are being shipped to New Orleans from Mediterranean ports, and so Mediterranean merchants are gathering the goods of a variety of artisans and craftspeople and merchants all along the northern Mediterranean lip, and packing that stuff into ships, sending it to the West Indies, sending it to New Orleans, and then some of it gets shipped up here in packets for the settlers here in the Illinois country. So this thing went a long way. This thing was made in Italy sometime in the mid-18th century. It was sent across the Atlantic. It ended up in New Orleans. It came up the Mississippi. It was used in a dwelling very near where I'm standing, and then it broke, and it ended up in this pit. That's out? There.
Wow. You got that much to the left there.
Okay. All right. So Rob and Jane are in feature 1, though a feature that had all of the broken bottles in it, and they just popped this out of the ground. And it's an ointment or a salve pot. It's something that you would get any kind of viscous creams or medicines from a druggist. And these kind of salve pots, when they're made in France, are reasonably common on French sites. But this one's not. This one's actually is Dutch. This is identical to little salve pots that were being made in Amsterdam all the way back into the 1500s. It's just that they were very conservative. They stayed the same for 250 years. And this is the first one I've ever seen from 18th century Illinois contexts. So it's kind of exciting. It just shows how connected we were to the rest of the Western world, even by the 1740s. Nice. Who got to pull the little pot out of the ground?
Jane.
Lucky dog.
I heard him talking and pressing me while I was over there.
It might still be going, but it's weakening.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything there yet that I'd
I
seen.
can't tell if this is us doing this here or not.
But
I
there
mean,
is,
there is something here.
if it's soft,
There's this.
the
This
two
is-
that I found over there were soft, much softer soil.
Okay. I'm in feature 3. When we started this today, we thought it was a little basin with some animal bones in it, and that was about it. And it got bigger, and it got deeper, and I'm still not in the bottom of it. But what it appears to be is a massive wall trench that supported at least one set of vertical logs for a wall of some sort. But we're looking at a trench that goes from about where my probe is here to about here. So it's a big, wide trench, and it's also completely straight up and down. We've seen wall trenches on houses that can start out that wide, but they get narrow really quickly. This one doesn't. This one just goes straight down all the way, and it's got distinctive sets of soils that we'll look at a little bit later that show us where they put the logs, and then also where they backfilled clean soil the day that this building was constructed. Now, the reason we're here this month is to look for Fort de Chartres number 3. It's the third wooden fort that was built at this locale. This one was built in 1732. People have been looking in this area primarily because of an aerial photograph stain that is roughly in this vicinity, although no one's really pinned that down, and that's something we have to do. People have dug a lot of test units over the last 30 years thinking they had edges of the fort, but oftentimes they turn out to be other features that are associated with the village that basically surrounded the fort over time. So it's been very elusive, and in my mind, this is the most definitive archaeological feature that suggests that we're looking at something much more significant, much more substantial than a residence. This looks very possible like a palisade wall for a fort. And we know from Margaret's research with the period documents that this fort was constantly being repaired. And there may even be evidence in this profile of them doing just that, that in fact the day this fort was built, the trench may have only been this wide, and then they had to dig it back behind those decaying logs, dig it back and add more logs and more supports to keep everything standing. And what we're going to do now is actually use this probe to see how deep this thing is going.
Only a few inches, please.
Well, if you want it to be a fort, you're going to have to pay for it. The depth. Is there a nail over there still? Well, that's all still feature fill. Okay, so that adds 20 centimeters to a 60 centimeters. So that puts us down 80 centimeters, which is approaching 3 feet in English units of measure. And Margaret Brown, what do the records tell you about the depth of these trenches when they're building forts?
Well, the second fort was 3 feet. That's 3 PA, which is about the same as an English fort.
So there you go. Getting through it. It might be getting close to the bottom. So at approximately 3 feet deep is about right on the money with what we know the second fort, how the second fort was constructed. So it's looking good. This could change on a dime, but right now, after all the guessing and all the supposing, this is actual evidence that seems to support the aerial photograph and the historical records about where Fort de Chartres was supposed to be. Finally. It's pretty cool.
Easy move.